day, ladies and gentlemen. It's your girl Dion Michelle from Love, Life, and the Law. And I've got a serious subject to discuss today. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. And frankly, I'm going to start off by saying I don't really have a good answer for the issues that arise as a result of this subject, but it's an important one to discuss. So the subject is being stopped by a cop. Now, this could either be in a vehicle, or it could be when you're walking. It could be as a result of something that happened in a store. The point is, it's police interactions. So let's start with the commentary that I don't believe the majority of police officers are intending to do nefarious things to us. However, what I can say is that I've had enough experiences of my own where I've been stopped and had things happen related to police interactions that caused me to say we need to be aware of what our rights are. So I'll give you an example. I was driving along one day, attempting to figure out what I was going to do for the day. I had decided I was probably going to go get a massage, and so while I was driving, I had all my windows open, sunroof open. It was a beautiful sunny day, probably in about June, in the Virginia area. I was driving. I drove past a police officer. He was on a motorcycle. He was sitting at in an area on the highway, and he pulled out after I passed, and he stopped me. He asked me if I knew how fast I was going. I said, I don't know how fast I was going, but I'm not in a rush. Well, long story short, by the time he got done, he had put both his elbows inside of my car. He was basically showing me the two spiderweb tattoos on his elbows, and he ended up telling me he knew I was an attorney. He didn't care. He gave me a ticket. He said, you just better be glad all I gave you a ticket for was speeding. So I'm going to tell you what I did, and then I'm going to talk to you about how I think some of these interactions should be handled. So what I did was pulled out my other phone after he went back to the car to go look up my license and make sure I didn't have a record. I turned that phone on record, and I had another phone sitting on my armrest. I asked him why he stopped me. He said I was going 25 miles over the speed limit. I told him he was mistaken because there were 2 or 3 cars that had passed me, and I saw one car going pretty fast. So I said, I think it was the other vehicle that you actually clocked. We ended up kind of going back and forth, and at some point he acted as if he was going to curse at me, and I told him, I said, you're not going to curse at me. We're either both going to be professional or it's going to be a problem. So he calmed down. I never raised my voice. I didn't get indignant. I didn't curse. I didn't do any of those things because I knew that no matter attorney, soldier, woman, I was going to be on the losing end of that battle. So I took the ticket, and then I went to court. I represented myself, of course, and I ended up winning. Now, that could have gone a lot of different ways. I was kind of on a side street. After he pulled me over, he had to stop me again. I asked him to stop again because the information on the ticket was wrong. So when we pulled over the second time, we were in an area that there was no one around. And even though I was recording, who cares about a recording if you're dead, right? So, and that's honest to goodness. I think that way. I think I need to make it out of this interaction alive so that I can tell the story. I commend the same thing to you, especially people of color. Now, I'm going to tell you what I understand. I understand that there have been countless instances or incidents where the person did everything they were told. They put their hands up. They got down on the ground. They put their hands behind their back. They attempted to give their ID. They put their hands on the steering wheel and they still end up being mistreated. I personally believe some of this stuff is based off of fear. Fear because they're young officers. These are high energy interactions. Maybe they've had bad experiences in the past. Fear sometimes because they're smaller than the person that they are approaching. Fear because of, goodness, who knows? Again, I can't be in the mind of another person. But I do believe a lot of this stuff is based off of fear. Fear causes us to react irrationally. So, as an attorney, not as a woman, not as a person of color, as an attorney, I want to give you a few tips on how to deal with peace officers. And I use that term colloquially, but honestly. When you're dealing with an officer of the peace, here are some ways to survive the interaction. The first thing, do what you can to make sure that your hands are in plain sight at all times. I know this seems strange, but sometimes you got to put yourself in the shoes of the person who you're talking to or who is approaching you. When I think about a peace officer approaching me, I think that they think something bad has happened and they're approaching me with that in mind. So it's my job to mentally disarm them, or at least get them to see a different vantage point. I'll give you another example. I was in a car with somebody I know, and we were arguing. I was not paying attention to the speed. And as I came over a hill, there was a police officer at the bottom of the hill, and they pulled me over. And I figured I would get pulled over because when I saw the police officer and I looked at my speedometer, I was speeding. So they pulled me over, we started talking, and they said, "Do you know how fast you were going?" I said, "I do not." I didn't know how fast I was going when they clocked me. And he explained to me how fast he clocked me, and then he said, "Why were you going so fast?" I said, "Ignorant, just ignorant." All three of us burst out laughing. He still checked my license to make sure that I didn't have any other issues or tickets. I ended up not getting a ticket, but the truth of the matter is that was a way of disarming the situation. Now, I'm not telling you to turn into, a comedian, because they're usually very serious circumstances. If it's nighttime, it makes it even worse because the darkness adds another element of surprise. All I'm telling you is my goal is to be the most respectful person that I can be in the circumstance without allowing myself to be disrespected. So, if you can put yourself in the other person's shoes and understand that it's probably a tumultuous situation for them, sometimes that makes things easier. My nose keeps itching. Not quite sure what that means, but my mother would say it means you need to wash it. So, anywho, I think if you can do that first step, it'll help. The second thing is try not to have an attitude. Attempt. I don't like the word try very much. Attempt not to have an attitude. Now, what do I mean by that? You get pulled over, you had a bad day. It's not the police officer's fault that you had a bad day. Now, the stop might make it worse, or maybe because you had a bad day, you were driving in a way that made them have to pull you over. But just because they pulled you over, it's not their fault you had a bad day. Realize what's happening with yourself. The next thing is you have to be careful how you talk to people. Anybody that has kids, you know that if you call your child in and say, "Hey, what happened to the cookies?" "I don't know." You already know that if they give you that reaction, it's going to cause you to be like, "Who you talking to like that?" It doesn't have to be that way. If we can think through what our role is and what's going on, sometimes it helps disarm the circumstance. Now, every situation is different. So please don't take this to mean that every single time somebody gets stopped, this is what you should do every time, because you got to deal with the circumstance. When I was in law school, I got pulled over on a country road. It was dark. It was a blizzard. It was just me, my mother, and a police officer. When they came up to the car, all I did was let my window down about 6 inches. I handed my driver's license and registration through that 6-inch hole. The police officer asked me if I would let the window all the way down. I told him I will not. I don't understand why you're pulling me over, because I hadn't violated any laws. But here's my information, because I want you to know that I don't have anything to hide. When he came back, because I hadn't done anything wrong, the only thing he could say to me is, oh, you've got an illegal license plate cover. Now, my mother started yelling out, this was a while ago, she started yelling out, Rodney King, Rodney King. I said, Mom, please, please stop. We do not want this man to kill us on this side road and our bodies not get found until the spring thaw. But just because I got pulled over, it didn't mean that I had to let my window all the way down and all those types of things. So when I say follow instructions, what I'm saying to you is just be mindful, but you also have to protect yourself. I kept my door locked. I made sure that my lights were on. I think at that point I also turned on my interior light in the car. But by the time the interaction was over, I think he gave me a warning for my license plate cover, and then that was the end of the circumstance. There are times when I've had family members be stopped by security officers inside of department stores. One of them actually got pulled to the back, got her bag ripped out of her hand, tossed on the table, and got yelled at by the officer. I know you stole this scarf. She showed him the receipt. He looked like a fool, and that was probably the fastest money she ever made. Why? Because I was able to call that department store, let them know the error in the actions of the officer. And because my cousin maintained her cool, we had a great cause of action. Never even had to go to court. But had she been belligerent or had she been combative, it would not have been as good of a circumstance. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not telling you that every interaction with a police officer is going to be a positive one. I'm not telling you that you shouldn't be angry or frustrated if you get pulled over for no reason. There's video of my little cousin getting pulled over in a predominantly white area near where I'm from. Pulled out of the car, handcuffed, car searched, nothing found. Oh, okay, you can go. Those are the kind of things that we call the ACLU and the NAACP about. But I'm happy he made it out of the circumstance alive. The way you beat a lot of these organizations, and I don't care if it's a municipality or an alt-right organization, the way you beat these organizations, and I don't mean that in a way that Republicans are bad and all that stuff, don't read into it. The way you beat these organizations that are intent on disruption, or they have small segments of people who don't want to allow us all to exercise our God-given and inalienable rights, is by hitting them in the pocket, not in the mouth. It's by bringing it to light and showing how foolish they are. That one interaction should not define who you are. What it should do is set the tone for how they act in the future. Well, that's my take on it. Write a comment below. Let me know what your take is. Share, like, subscribe. This is information that I hope you believe people need to hear. I want you to make it out alive. But that don't mean you can't kick butt and take names. It's your girl, Dion Michelle. And you know the deal. I know a lot about a little and a little about a lot. Biggest thing I know, gotta keep God up top. Ciao.